So let's talk about this political cartoon, because wrapped up in this political cartoon is an enormous amount, and I really think it's worth discussing, especially the way that this has been portrayed, because honestly, this cartoon doesn't really go far enough. Now, one of the things that really is annoying me at the moment, I mean, you'll notice that this is the representation of the Democratic Party attacking the pillars of American society. American society is crumbling because of these attacks. Not an invalid observation at all. The thing that's invalid about this is how far the Democrats has got. It's not that they haven't yet attacked due process, it's that the attack failed. And that's the problem they have with Kavanaugh. They expected that they would be able to stop this person just on the grounds that they have accused him of something, and obviously this is a violation of the spirit of due process. And so, fucking finally, the Republicans found their balls and told the Democrats that their moral standards are backwards, and that they're doing damage to society overall, and that they have to be stopped. And that was by a fucking gnat's cock that distinction was made, and it turned Lindsey Graham into a superstar. And suddenly, who's the turtle guy? Mitch McConnell. Suddenly Mitch McConnell is a hero, and I'm there cheering them on. I'm like, fucking finally! Thank God someone is prepared to deal with this, because I'm sick of the way that the left is acting at the moment. I'm just really sick of it. Like, it's totally about deconstruction. And that's literally everything. They don't have any other tools. Everything is a hammer to smash things down. That's the point. And this is how they see themselves, as great liberators. You know, they see themselves as great liberators, saying, well, we'll get rid of all these barriers, all these bonds of service and duty to one another. These are actually all oppression. These are forms of oppression, and we need to be able to make it so that at any point everyone is 100% free. And when I say free, I don't just mean politically free. I mean emotionally. I mean from the bonds of having care about other people. They want complete autonomy for the individual, effectively. And it sounds crazy, because then you think, okay, well, hang on. Are you suggesting that we can break up families? Well, of course they don't care about breaking up families. Holy shit. Like, I saw an SJW cheering for the Canadian state having, they'd invented a new reason, a progressive reason, to take children away from their parents. And I'm just thinking, fuck, man. Taking a kid away from their parents should be the option of last resort. When all else has failed, and these parents are still abusing the child, say, like, physically abusing them, I don't know. You know, you take the child away and you rehome them. You know, there's nothing more that you can do for the child's safety. You have to do something. That's what you do, because that's the worst thing you can do to the kid. That's the worst thing you can do. But if you're progressive, you don't really care about that. What you care about is that there isn't a form of oppression there instead. It doesn't really matter what the consequence is to the child. I mean, like, you know, suggesting that children should have no boundaries and borders, which is a very progressive thing to do, is not good for them in their development into becoming a full and sort of self-actualized human adult. It's really bad for that. It turns them into spoiled brats. It turns them paranoid, uncaring, and untrusting in many cases. And I'm not just pulling this out of my ass. There are studies after study after study that will show you that the worst thing you can do to a child is remove it from its family. That's just bad for the kid. And it's like, okay, so why is the left in favour of it? And it's purely because of the concept of any kind of duty to others being a form of oppression. That's what it is. And so this means there just isn't anywhere that they will stop. Because the more they accomplish, the more they're going to say, well, these further things that in fact were quite weak and in fact barely in place, these are also bonds of oppression because we are now more sensitive to it. The ultimate goal is something they consider to be ultimate freedom. It's not how I conceive of ultimate freedom to be. Frankly, I see that as being enslaved to one's frankly baser desires. If anything, it seems to be a person enslaved to their own whims and unable to have any kind of resistance to their own desires for more than 2 minutes. Not even that, you know. That's the trajectory it's to go on. It's you must follow your whim at all times, and at no point is self-denial in any way a good thing, but I think that self-denial is actually a key facet of making a decent human being, is one that will deny themselves the full limit of a thing, because even if they think it might be a good idea, there's probably some sort of negative consequence, and temperance in this regard is probably a virtue, I would say. But the thing about the left is, they've got fully messianic at this point. I mean, they're going at everything as hard as they can, and with no regard to the consequences afterwards if they fail. This has been a total fucking Hail Mary, and all or nothing, and now they have to live with everyone afterwards because they failed? I mean, they're acting like they're Bolsheviks, and now they've failed. I mean, they don't know what to do, because normally they'd all be dead. But now, but I'm not joking either, right? This is the attitude with which they're approaching the Republicans and Donald Trump, as if they are evil incarnate, not their countrymen, not the loyal opposition. It's like they're traitors to the revolution, obviously, or they're the counter-revolutionary forces. And now it's all over. Now it's like the midterms, and I don't think that they're going to do particularly well there. I don't see the presence. I don't see the love of the Democratic Party. And I think that they think that because they're the underdog, that they have an advantage or something. But I don't know, man. I mean, I read a lot of different kinds of forums, different, cultural interests, and I try to keep a wide view on almost every side of the political divide. And the Republicans still seem to want it more. The Democrats have gone into like autistic screeching mode, where they think that this outpouring of anger and emotion and belligerence is somehow appears justified to the bystander. And I don't think it does. I think it looks hysterical. I don't mean that as funny. I mean, you look like you're in the grip of a hysteria and like a wild moral panic. And I think back to when Obama got in, and you could see the footage of libertarians protesting, and they would be standing there with signs saying Obama is a communist, which obviously he wasn't a communist. But they weren't screaming like emotional children. They were still acting like adults. They just had really wacky perspectives. And so it's like, okay, it's effectively like if a bunch of them are stood around, if a bunch of middle-aged housewives are stood around politely holding "you were a Nazi" sign, and they just walked up to us and they were like, "We think you're Nazis." And we're like, we're sorry you think that. We'll have a dialogue, but then they're going, "No, but we still think you're Nazis," and then walked off. I mean, you'd be like, okay, well, but at least they weren't rude. But just the behaviour of the Democratic Party, the activists, and the far left. I mean, I've seen various articles around, and I'll try and put some in the description to substantiate what I'm saying, because I'm just giving you like a rundown of all of the things that I've seen of late. And I mean, like, I've seen articles suggesting that the radical left are not making the Democrats more popular, which I don't think they are at all. I think they don't understand. I mean, like, if you take out a lot of their requests, sort of like, hey, Medicare or whatever, universal healthcare, things that are good, which is just what they'll say. If you take them out of context and ask a random American, often in like Republican states and whatnot, do you think this would be a good idea? They'll say yes, because they're not thinking, well, also tied to this, the tip of this iceberg is the total destruction of Western civilization and white people, as at least, I don't know, a majority in their own countries. That's the plan that this idea has come from. But it also is that there are other ideas that still have these plans, an intersection, if you will. There are other belief systems that can also do this one thing, but don't go down the road of destroying Western civilization. And so maybe we should listen to them rather than the far left. And that's probably what they're thinking when they say, oh yeah, universal healthcare seems to work in Europe and they're not communist yet. So, it maybe we can try that. But the Democratic Socialists, they don't understand that they look crazy. They look, and it's not just the bulgy eyes of Ocasio-Cortez. It's the way that they act is really like, it's desperate. It's desperate, like it's their last fucking chance. Like they can see it and they have to grab, and it's like, you guys should come across less like you're about to burn the place down if you don't win. That's honestly how you look. And I'm just thinking, fuck me, like the Antifa in Portland that were just terrorizing motorists going through a junction, yelling white supremacists at them and stuff like that. It's like regular people look at that and go, okay, no. But I think this is the whole thing with like diversity and multiculturalism and whatnot. I think it is tiny pockets of segregation that they want, with an overall dominant culture that is effectively corporate and can interchangeably interface with any one of these cultural groups. But the cultural groups themselves have very definite boundaries and are not allowed to touch, and they have to remain separate. And if one group is more influential than another, that group has to be lifted up and the other group has to check their privilege. Basically, they're social planners. But instead of caring about economics very much, although obviously the socialists do, but it's not just socialists, it's the whole intersectional sort of panoply. It's taking the same principles of centralizing an economy and applying them to culture, and then defining through a series of various moral standards who can and can't be the ones who dictate what happens in a certain cultural space. And that's a real problem to me, because I think I should dictate what happens in my immediate cultural space, as everyone else should around theirs. You know, you dictate how you interface with the world, and it's up to you to make the decision on what's good and bad, and I'll give you feedback, and you expect everyone else you deal with, and this is how it's a giant sort of negotiation culturally, instead of having a standard imposed from the top on everyone's behaviour, because frankly I don't think that there is a legitimate reason for you to do that. I don't think that you are making less racists, creating less racism. You're not, equalising anything. What you're doing is causing revolutions in social areas, like with Gamergate, Comicsgate, and the Star Wars gate that's coming up, and it doesn't work. You've got to let people be free to be what they want to be, and they'll negotiate it with one another. And everywhere you go, you find this kind of resistance. And it's because you are attacking parts of society that people don't object to or actively desire. See, I'm rambling obviously now, but it's just been something that I've observed from afar, I'm watching these trends coming out, and it's just, I can't believe how brazen the Democrats are. I would never think to attack due process, or freedom of religion or freedom of speech, obviously. But of all due fucking process, man, that is, you've and like seen them coming out now. Oh, we hate the Electoral College. Well, that's actually an equalising force, isn't it? That's actually the point of it, is to equalise power. Because there are 100 senators, 50 states, is it not? 2 per state, as far as I understand it. Correct me if I'm wrong. But the point is, it doesn't actually depend on the size of the state, because that's just raw power. This is now an equalisation of power, and now we have to persuade each other using argument, which is surely what the Marxian left wants. I mean, surely you're looking at going, well, the democratic states are too powerful. Look at these massive cities. The power should be equalised. You should be in favour of the Electoral College as a way of being fair. But the problem is, it's to your enemies, and the fairness is keeping you from oppressing them, isn't it? And that's what this is fucking about. It's like, look, we can enshrine our privilege in law if we can just knock down these pillars. And you've managed it in Europe, but thank fuck you're not managing it in America.